Welcome to Full Discourse. I'm Josh Elkin, and today we have two awesome guests. They've co-written the New York Times bestselling book, Koreatown, and its follow-up, KOREAWORLD, which they're actually currently on tour for. So make sure to check out if they're coming to a city near you and say that Josh sent you. In this episode, we're talking about soft power and how cultural influence, especially through food, can amplify a country's presence beyond its own borders and into a global mainstream. We've chatted before with previous guests like Max Abrams, an expat living in Seoul, on the increasing popularity of Korean food in the West. Think of this as a follow-up sequel to that conversation where we discuss the other side of the counter, the chefs and restaurant owners themselves who are here in the US. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Josh, I just have to say, your collection of James Beard memorabilia here at the studio, A+.
Thank you so much.
You're a big James Beard stan.
I just like all things food.
Yeah.
You know, they call me Josh Elkin, all things food. That was my moniker when I was streaming on Twitch. Follow me for all things food.
Wait, Twitch. So when you're doing Twitch, you were like Keith Lee style, like doing like live reviews of restaurants?
No. I don't really do reviews. I do cooking mostly. That's my shit. Yeah.
Nice, man. Cool.
Hence we were talking about Epic Mealtime before.
Yeah.
I was the food principal on that, so all those things came from my brain.
EMT.
So it's a long time ago. But enough about me. This audience knows that I had a career making bullshit food. We're talking about you guys. We're talking about more specifically what you guys are doing, what you're currently working on.
Yeah.
You guys want to give me like a little bit of a spiel of each other and sort of like what you're currently with right now?
So we are in the midst of our second book. Our first book was Koreatown. Our second book is called KOREAWORLD. We're in the midst of our cookbook tour. This is our whatever number stop. We went to New
Double
York,
digs right
DC, now. Miami. He went to Michigan. We're in LA. LA is the epicenter. It's the mecca for Korean food, Korean culture.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So it felt very
it's part
right.
of my notes.
It felt very right to be here. It's an honor to be on your platform.
Thank you.
And I brought my friend Maddie.
Yeah.
We kind of wrote a book together.
Colleague, right?
Yeah, co-author.
Brother, partner
in crime. We know each
stuff.
other 13 years.
Too long.
In this industry, it's a long time.
Yeah, it's been absolutely, it felt like 130 years. But in terms of the industry, not our friendship knows no time. It's timeless, I'd say.
I like that.
My spiel is that Deuki and I met. I'm a journalist. I write about food. I host the This Is Taste, the podcast. I run a publication called Taste, but also Deuki and I just write cookbooks together. So we are in the midst of this tour talking about modern Korean food. So I think that's the big difference between the first book and second book. Is the second book is modern Korean food, not just here in the United States, but in Korea, where we spend a lot of time.
That's a awesome subject because I had a expat from New York that lives in Korea now. A couple of weeks ago on the pod, Max Abrams, and we were talking a lot about that. It wasn't necessarily Korean food here; it was more Korean food and the evolution of it in Korea. So that's really cool. So, your first cookbook was just like the introduction of just Korean food in general, or what was that all about?
Our first cookbook, we also wrote it 10 years ago, right? So it's a completely different scene, completely different conversation around Korean food, Korean culture. The angle was really taking a deep dive into the Koreatowns, not only New York, LA, we went to Atlanta, we went to Madison, Wisconsin, everywhere in between. And we really did focus more on the Korean food in America and kind of what was happening then, which was there was a lot of excitement at that moment as well. And then now, 10 years later, we got to travel to Korea for 2.5 years. And for us, we got to really see and you mentioned it a little bit, this evolution, dare we say, culinary revolution of sorts in Korea itself. So we got to kind of document that and, tell the story through our lens.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I grew up in Montreal.
Yeah.
We were talking about that before. Not a lot of...
Go Habs.
Go Habs, go.
Yeah. Go Habs, go.
I like you, man.
What a great experience when you go to a Habs game. There's cheerleaders, Labatt's are like $8. And you got like 14,000 people cheering. Never been to a sporting event like it. I gotta say, go Habs, go.
26,356.
That is absolutely where you gotta be.
Sold out for the last 20 years.
Exactly. That's the thing. They sold out every game.
They're not
I don't
even
know
good.
if I'm more impressed that you know that or
Dude.
you know the attendance count. That's
every Montrealer
both
is like,
impressive.
I don't even play hockey. Like, I just know, you know. I don't even, but so coming from Montreal, I didn't grow up with a lot of Koreans. Korean food, I didn't ever even know existed, and well, obviously it existed, but like never tried it until I came out to LA in 2011.
Yeah.
So to me, 10 years ago, you're talking about 10 years ago, like all I knew about Korean food was Korean barbecue.
Yep.
Which is like, how do you feel about that? Like that's it, an intro is an intro. Like if you're gonna get introduced anyway, in my experience, like isn't that okay? That's fine, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Maddie mentions it perfectly, and it was. We on this tour, we get to really see the past. We get to talk about the past. We talk about Korean food now. We are, dare we say, talking about what we think it'll be in the future. But you're right. 10 years ago, if you knew Korean barbecue, we were like very excited. Like, oh, okay, like something. You know gochujang. You know kimchi, right? I would say the conversation is very different now. What do you think, man?
Completely. It's changed completely. I think the media story is a big one. I know the media has finally caught up to what we were reporting on 2016, which is like Korean food is more than barbecue. And now that's the biggest story of our generation is this rise of modern Korean food. So I would fully agree that back then it was like Korean barbecue and tacos. We were pushing back. We were doing like jaeuk bokum. We were doing like kimchi jjigae and tangs guk, like all sorts of rice dishes that were not considered the mainstream Korean food. And I thought we were very proud of what we were doing. We were bringing it to a wide audience. But then we obviously decided we needed to make a big change with our second book. So the focus was modern Korean cuisine. And we can go over some examples of what that means. But really right now, we're at this inflection point with Korean food in America. It's super exciting. And honestly, this book captures it all. We feel proud. It's well-timed as well. So we're excited about it. Yeah.
I'm going to have to pick one of those up. For sure.
The cookbook?
Yeah.
We didn't send a cookbook.
My guy, we can give you a cookbook.
Wait, are you doing it? You guys are doing an event here in LA this week, right?
We already did it.
You did it.
It was cool though.
We dropped like 6 balls on this one. We didn't. Okay.
It's fine. It's
The-
fine.
Book is coming, brother.
Josh,
Book is coming.
you're not getting love.
Yeah.
We're not giving you love. And I feel like this is a problem. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to rewind, and maybe if there's a video like the rewind motion, because right now you and I, we need to like say, you have the book, you attended our launch party, which was really great.
So fun, huh?
And you're
So
like, oh
fun.
yeah, we're going to go
How
over
was it though? Honestly, how was the launch party?
gas.
Yeah,
I mean,
good.
it was super.
Just the gas.
I'm 43, so I went a decade younger.
Where was it, by the way? This won't make it. but yeah.
BBCM. It was in West Hollywood.
Okay, cool.
And apparently it's an LA thing. People don't go out to
sorry.
the West Hollywood.
And not anymore. They used to.
But
back in
people
the day.
showed up. The love was real. It was.
I would think you would do it in
150 so many
Koreatown. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, and then we threw a curveball. We're like, all right, everyone come to the West.
Have you been to the? It's a BBCM stands for the butcher, the baker, the cappuccino maker. It's that place right on Sunset.
I feel like maybe
it's
I've
a dope
seen it.
space.
Is
It's
it
a
a newer spot? It's a newer spot. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful space, brunch spot. You know.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the guys who do Koreatown, the Koreatown Run Club, and at Koreatown Instagram?
No.
Those guys. Okay,
No.
cool. All right.
I know a couple Korean, like what's his name? Chris Cho. You know him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Chris Show.
He's a Korean chef out here.
Chris.
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 Oh,
Chris.
Oh,
Chris.
My bad.
I knew you meant.
Yeah.
Chris. Oh,
My bad.
Legend.
So it's really cool that you guys were doing all this shit before anyone was doing it. Does it it's 8 years later and now you got to like flip it because you already talked about what everyone's talking about, right? Like, is that why you made this book, the modern?
I don't feel comfortable saying we did it before, and I think we documented it. I think in terms of the cookbook, for sure.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it wasn't like a Korean chef. It wasn't like a restaurant focused book. It was very, Maddie's background, editorial background. So that's why it was, I think, presented very differently. It was an exciting subject in general. So I think a lot of people, no one knows now who Maddie and I are. So it wasn't like our cookbook. It was, we got to tell the story of a very exciting subject in a very unique way. So in that regards, yeah, baby.
How the hell did that even happen? Like, how did this come to be?
Our union started. We wrote a guidebook together 13 years ago, and we really just saw, after writing a guidebook about restaurants in New York, it was 65 restaurants we went to. Yeah, and honestly, the impetus for our first book, Koreatown, was we saw the market and we knew that there was a story to be told about modern Koreatowns in America. So that was our first book. But we've been like, we vibed over food. Like food was our common language. Deuki's an extremely talented chef, had been working in fine dining. Momofuku, John George, I'll go over your resume. Keep saying words.
I have it.
But you have it right there. Yeah. But, I was like, man, Deuki knows a lot about food. I write about food. We were vibing not just about Korean food, but all sorts of stuff. Talking a lot about tacos in New York. And, it was like a really nice partnership. And just we created it was an environment of like exchanging of ideas. So then we were like, okay, let's do a book. We wrote a proposal and put it out there. And the rest is kind of history. That book did extremely well. But we took a real hard pause. Like I wrote another couple cookbooks. Deuki worked on restaurants, moved to the Bay. So we really worked, but we were keeping our eye on Korean food in America. Like it was always obviously Deuki's heritage and his background. It's your story of your life. Me as more of the writer, I was kind of always aware of Korean food. So back around 2021, we were like, okay, let's do book 2. It's time. We have a lot to say, and it all fell into place.
Like Koreatowns nationally, like not every city has a Koreatown. Like it's basically major cities that have Koreatowns. Like, do you think that's why the book was so successful? Because people who are familiar with it but didn't have it wanted to like make it?
Yes and no. I would say a lot of the major cities has a Koreatown or a definitive place where you can get Korean food and Korean shops. But even for me as a Korean American myself, I was surprised. Everyone knows New York, everyone knows LA. And that's kind of like the more well-known ones. But even for me, just learning like Duluth has one of the largest Korean communities outside of maybe New York and LA. We were at Madison,
Duluth,
Wisconsin.
Georgia.
Duluth, Georgia. Sorry.
Not Minnesota.
I didn't even know there was Duluth, Minnesota.
Georgia, which is north of Atlanta.
He went to college. I didn't.
Yeah, no.
So for me, like just experiencing that, but also we had to define Koreatown. I remember in the book 10 years ago, we had to define what Koreatown is and was to us. And we would say like, sure, Koreatown is like that place that you go to, to get the Korean food and Korean culture, but also like it's the place where it's that one restaurant next to that one dry cleaner. And that's Koreatown for us. And it really was more of an ethos and kind of a place. It wasn't necessarily a physical place. Like we have Tori Miller in Madison, Wisconsin. He's probably the only guy doing Korean food out there, dare I say. In
Madison, yeah.
In Madison, Wisconsin. I remember telling Maddie, like, what am I doing in Madison, Wisconsin? Like, for this book. And it was so beautiful. That to us is Koreatown.
That's the story of Koreatown, right? You got like Tori Miller, exactly. I think like we're seeing the diaspora cook in so many different cities and so many different formats. And in KOREAWORLD, the book, we really try to tap into the different formats. So it's not just barbecue and tacos. There's a lot of different cool ideas happening. There's the spatial boundaries of Koreatowns are changing. In LA where we are, obviously like Olympic and Wilshire, 6, Normandy, around there, that's definitely Koreatown. But look downtown, look what's happening. Yongbyon, Perilla, which is a great place not far from where we're recording, that's doing these doshirak, these like boxes that are really exciting. You've got Baru doing like really cool like tasting menus. So that's not Koreatown, that's downtown LA. There's examples like that in Portland, Oregon, in New York City, around the country.
You brought up those restaurants, and a few of them I've had. Baru, like amazing. What a great experience. But it brings me to like this thought that I've had for a long time. I grew up in Montreal. You grew up in New York. Where'd you grow up?
New York.
New York also?
No, Jersey.
Jersey, okay.
I grew up in West Michigan, which is close to New York, but...
So when we were growing up, we're all give or take around the same age. We kind of grew up like around the same time. There was very specific like food cities. Like I come from Montreal, was always a food city because it's very European. Like LA's always been a food city. Vegas has always been a food city. New York's always been a food city. People always ask me like, oh, is LA such a good food city? Like, is it better than Montreal? And my response to that is, and to contribute to this like KOREAWORLD mentality, every city's a food city now, because there's like food is so global these days that there's skill everywhere, Now, do you think that because of that, it's lending itself to having more frequent Koreatowns? Like now more than ever, there's more Korean restaurants and like Korean cuisine everywhere?
No, I love what you mentioned, Josh, about it's accessible, that information. Like when I was growing, I'm going to sound really old right now, but like there was, I predate YouTube. I predate Google. Like it wasn't like, hey, just Google it.
You predate Google.
I don't predate. I don't know when Google started, but people weren't Googling stuff. It wasn't like common thing. So like for at least as a young chef, as a young cook, trying to gain anything, like I didn't know what was happening in Tokyo or Korea. Like we would have to wait growing up in New York. You had to wait for the New York Times every Wednesdays for the dining section, like food magazines once a month. Like I tell my team members that are younger and they're like, what do you mean you had to wait a month to read a magazine? It's like, yeah, it comes out once a month, you know? And now it's just a completely different story. If I want to know what's happening in Tokyo, I can do it right now while I'm doing this podcast with you. And because of that, you could be in the middle of OKC. So Chef Kevin Lee of OKC, Birdie's, I think is his restaurant, Korean restaurant, in the middle of Oklahoma City, right? Something unthinkable when we were doing our first book 10 years ago. And it could be in Kansas. I remember, and I guess this beautiful full circle moment, they were like, hey, like, what's the point of this book? What's the mission of this book? Is that one day we would love Korean food to be in the conversation of some family in Kansas being like, hey, what do you guys like, kids? What do you guys want? You know, Italian is up there, Chinese, maybe even sushi's still in that conversation. We would love that family to be like, oh, why not Korean today? You know, and we don't know if that's happened in the last 10 years. We'd like to think that it has, but we wouldn't be surprised that if maybe it's not the food, maybe they're watching the drama, right? I know more about Korean drama. I get my Korean drama information. I don't watch it from my non-Korean friends, which is like what is going on in the like the most beautiful way possible, right?
I'll tap into one thing you mentioned, which is there isn't a center. And I think it comes into a bigger question is like, there's no more monoculture, right? There's no more, I mean, we are segmented. We have cliques, we have our own tribes, but food is really part of that. And I think it's extremely exciting that there isn't a monoculture. There isn't like the food city of America is blank. Like Atlanta is the food center of the country. Well, not anymore, because literally every city, if you go to the Reddits or you go to the, TikToks from those cities, you're going to find incredible food in every city. There's like no denying that Sacramento, you go there and you like do some work, you're going to find an incredible Vietnamese restaurant. You're going to find likely a couple great Korean restaurants and then like mom and pop spots. And like, that's exciting as a food journalist myself. That to me is like the next 20 years is like no more monoculture. And then also the diversity of America, right? America becoming a much more diverse place. And I feeling like there is no majority is for food a very exciting thing.
Even globally, like I'm not that well traveled, but I have traveled, and some of the restaurants I've eaten at in other countries that are not necessarily like indigenous to those countries have been amazing, and to contribute to your point about like, the family in Kansas that's going to suggest Korean food or whatever that is. Yeah. Like I've seen it firsthand in Montreal where, 10 years ago, there was no Korean food. Now I go back and people are like, oh, you guys want to go like get even the smallest like Korean barbecue. Sure, yeah. Like I know it's like an entry level Korean sort of cuisine. It's something though. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. It's something. And that's really, really cool. But yeah, every city has good food. You just need to have any type of wherewithal to like do it. By the way, dial-up internet before Google, you were searching on web crawler. Yeah. You were searching on
Alta Vista,
Lycos,
Alta Vista. Yeah, let's go through all of them.
I mean, we're that old. So
yeah. Hotbot. Oh my we goodness. Can just play this
Ask
game.
Jeeves, like let's go.
Ask Jeeves, let's go. I mean, it will search. We already went over that. I feel like there's probably a few more. Man,
but you're 100% right. Like even back then, television. The TV guide, like you had to go through those sort of things. You had to wait. Like when I was growing up, the only food media that there was PBS. It was Julia Child,
bro.
Yeah,
Frugal Gourmet.
So refreshing.
Frugal Gourmet, man. Yes. Galloping Gourmet, probably less problematic. Frugal Gourmet. Don't go there.
I know. I recently learned a little bit about that.
He's canceled. He's like put a big X.
Jacques Pepin. He was great.
Rick Bayless was like the new guy. He was like, oh my God, look at this young chef.
Well, no, I mean,
Like,
you know, we can talk about food media forever. You know, like
Yeah.
Emerald was like the guy.
Yeah,
back
Emerald
then.
was the guy.
But in Canada, we had a whole different thing. Christine Cushing live. I don't know if you remember that.
Really?
No,
Oh,
I just
that
know
was
the
good
polka
shit.
dot door. That's all I know.
Hey, there we go.
The polka dot door was my PBS
Yeah,
Canadian X
that was
name
good
for
stuff.
it. Yeah. Great song too. One quick point I must say. Ultimate gatekeeping, though, when you have like this monoculture, you have these XYZ food media members back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. That's like ultimate gatekeeping, which, you know, has its problems, right? You don't want someone specifically to control the narrative. You want the information to flow freely. So I think we've evolved in a good way that and this is not shouting out or giving any criticism to like the way it used to be. I just think you have to note that.
I think in any culture or any genre, there's gatekeeping when it starts out. You know, I think we live in a society now where information is so flowing, it's hard to gatekeep anything. And I think that if you try to, it's bad.
Yeah,
you know?
it's bad. No, it's great.
It's not
I think it's great that there are less gatekeepers.
Yeah, I mean, like when I started cooking, it was a parody. I was making parody in my career, and a lot of people didn't like that, but a lot of other people thought it was cool. And like ultimately, I helped usher in the camaraderie that cooking for the amateur chef has been created.
Yep.
You know, so I don't fuck with that. I don't like stick my nose up at anything food. I think food culture and the food world that we live in right now is open for everybody. You know, just saying that because like I've met really like Michelin star chefs who are enamored with like me thinking about stuffing shit and other things, you know, and like all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's so stupid. Why would you think that? That your brains can't think that dumb, you know, like my brain can't think you're smart. So like your intelligence when it comes to food.
I mean, I just want to clarify it though. So like I'm the chef of this table. I fully agree with you is what I'm trying to say in that like food to me is just like an excuse. I am not one of those chefs that are like, hey, let's talk about heirloom tomatoes for an hour and a half. Like,
but that's what makes you successful. You're
open. I wore shorts to this
you're open,
thing,
though.
You know. So I'm very not like food to me is a great excuse for people, right? For me, my heart is in people. That's what fulfills me. I provide a living for 40 some odd individuals. We are gathered in this room because the excuse is food and cookbooks. So like, I love that element of the food. So I guess sure, if I want to run service and run a restaurant and do the food chefy stuff, absolutely. And we probably all have friends that like, we're going to be talking about mushrooms for an hour. Like, excellent. You know, but for me, like, I love this dialogue because food can go into 17 different directions and it all
the
fits.
three of us here are all in food and we all do things completely different.
I agree.
So like, that's a beautiful
different
thing,
things,
you know? We were talking about different geographical locations that have Koreatown, specifically in America, and you had mentioned somewhere in an obscure town that had like one restaurant next to a cleaners, and like that was Koreatown.
Yeah.
My idea of Koreatown, the only idea I have of Koreatown is of LA because it's where I was introduced to it, and here it's vast, like it's pretty awesome. Like you can walk for blocks and like it's just all Korean, which is great. What like conceptualizes a Koreatown? Like what's a quintessential Koreatown in your minds? Like,
I mean, number one, you're spoiled. Respectfully, you're spoiled in you're the best of the best, right? And we say it, we're not from LA, but we respect LA. We ask LA to never change. Yeah. We think Koreatown, and it was our model for a lot of what we do, both being from New York, Jersey. And like for us, Koreatown, we define it in a certain way, but it's not like, hey, we are the authorities in Koreatown. We have actually learned a lot meeting and hearing these stories. Even in last week when we're in New York, a chef who bought the book, a Korean adoptee chef, told me what Koreatown was for her. And that's what it is, you know, and not only the book, but Koreatown, she's in Minneapolis, right? And I didn't know. And she was educating me like middle of the release party for 20 minutes. She's like, hey, this is what's going on in Minneapolis. It's one of the largest Korean adoptee communities there. I would have never known. And just saying what the book is and what this book is going to be. So for us, journalist, chef, we can just put it out there and however people interpret it. And that's the same thing with food. That's the same thing with your art. Same thing with your writing. Like we can only put it out there, and how people receive it is going to make up what it becomes. And we love that part of it, you know, and hopefully we don't come off as this is what it is and that's it.
You're not like drawing a line in the sand. You're speaking from your own kind of like.
Correct. Yeah. And it's evolving as well as we, you know, have conversations with you and have conversations with, and just we're students just as much as we are hopefully a conduit to a lot of the beautiful stories that we have too. So
don't you think that's kind of like a euphemism of cooking and food? It's like it's a never ending thing. There's no like end. Things evolve, things change.
Perpetual, of course. Like, you know, it's all about asking questions and more questions coming back at you when you ask those questions. I mean, to answer your question briefly, I think a Koreatown is defined by a center. Could be a religious, could be a church, could be a community center, could be a barbecue restaurant, could be a dry cleaner, it could be all 5 of those together. But what is the commonality is folks cooking Korean food. There's always going to be a restaurant of some sort in that community. And I feel like there's Korean communities around America in a way that maybe we haven't even seen, because we obviously haven't traveled everywhere. But I was in San Diego, I would say 2 years ago, and Deuki and I haven't even talked about this, but like San Diego had this tiny little pocket of Korean restaurants, and I had 3 of the 4 or 5 things I just mentioned. So that's what defines it. I mean, and they actually had a really good a bokkeumbap, a fried rice, with local California seafood, which was really good. And I mean, I just thought that, I was like, wow, this is like a Koreatown that we've never thought about. We actually didn't include it in our book, but it was just one of those examples.
So like the evolution is constant.
It's constant.
Like it's always happening.
Koreatown, that moniker gives it a place kind of connotation, I guess KOREAWORLD too. Yeah. But it really is. I like to use my mom as an example. She hates it when I talk about her because I usually just say
shouts to mom.
She's not a good cook. She really isn't. Her food is not something to talk about. But I would say she embodies Koreatown and what that means. And I told her about this, in that she doesn't know how to speak English. She's lived here 30. She's lived more years now in America than she has in Korea, because she came when she was 20 something. And she made it a point that her kids, me and my sister, to not forget Korean. So now we're fluent in Korean. And she would always eat Korean food. We would always eat Korean food at home. So she embodies, more than anyone that I know, I guess most closest to me, of her sacrifice, and the people too. Like, hey, that restaurant owner in the middle of Kansas, that sure, he can go make American food and maybe get more business because that's the audience. But no, he or she is going to cook Korean food, because for better or worse, I do love that Koreans have that for us, by us mentality. And there is some of that, like, yeah, we'll cater to the audience, but we're not going to dilute or necessarily translate our food and culture for you. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, great. But we're going to keep this. And my mom embodies that. And we've benefited immensely.
But all these, every town, like if it's a Chinatown, if it's a Little Italy, if it's a Koreatown, like the whole, for me at least, allure of that is they don't bend to an American palate. Because what is American food anyways?
Correct. Yeah,
it's a blend of everything. Like that's just what it is. America doesn't have their own food. It's just whatever anyone brought here.
Yeah.
And started making.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that about like any type of town, Koreatowns, whatever. It's like you don't want to make this American food. If you're gonna go there, you want to eat what everyone else is eating.
Yeah.
You know who Freddie Wong is? Okay, he's a Chinese content creator. He used to do VFX on YouTube back in the day. Okay. And he was talking about, at one point he was talking about like how if you want to find the best Chinese restaurant, like make sure it's like 3 stars on Yelp.
Yeah.
Because
no
like,
service,
yeah,
like
no,
ambience,
it's good because it's like whatever.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And then what you were saying about like what a Koreatown is defined by, like there is really no definition. It's kind of could be anything, right? Which I think is really, really cool. But with this global world, that's like this global economy, it obviously is growing and it's obviously getting bigger. And you were saying like in San Diego, they were using California like fresh caught seafood to make, like that's the coolest part, right? Because they're making traditional Korean food, but using like local ingredients.
Yeah. I mean, in KOREAWORLD, in our book, we call it modern. Like it's really the modernity of it all. And I think right now that's important. This book is about the zeitgeist. It's about what's happening right now. And it's not the canon of Korean cooking. Like Manji has done that. We did that with Koreatown. So those books were all really great and did a nice job. But we're really tapping into your point exactly. Like it's a very flexible definition. One example I'll give is in Korea, we wrote about coffee culture there, and coffee culture there is tremendous. And I think Japan gets its flowers repeatedly about coffee, and sure, there's great coffee in Tokyo and all around the country. But honestly, if you go to Korea, a country of 50 million, they're doing like some of the best coffee in the world, and a couple places like Fritz, a place called Mesh, they're doing excellent roasting. And it's on the level of places in America and in Copenhagen, et cetera. And to me, that is Koreatown and Korea world in the modern sense. It's not saying it's only kimchi jjigae and kalbi and jaekbokum. It's all about this like modernity. We don't want to put Korean food in a box at all. We break those barriers. So I think you're getting at a really cool topic here, which is like defining Korean food right now. And really, we've done our best job of talking about the zeitgeist. And I mean, there's many examples of just modern ways that feel maybe Western. They might even feel South American in some ways. They might feel Latin in some ways. To us, that feels like Korea world.
I love that. And I love coffee.
Yeah, buddy. You made us a nice... Did you? Oh, you didn't make a coffee. I feel like you could make us some coffee.
I could. You want some coffee?
I feel like maybe at some point in this... In this day,
so many coffees.
Yeah, we could like riff about. Do you like naturally processed or do you like washed coffees? Do you process? Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's all good. You probably like both.
Yeah, I grind my own beans every day.
Where do you buy coffee in LA?
I get my coffee shipped to me from beans.com.
Oh, really? So do you have roasters that you enjoy? Is there like one that comes to mind?
Not really. Yeah. I like I usually like just like trying new things. Yeah, you know what I mean. So
can I shout out a couple?
100%.
I feel for your viewers and listeners. I feel
for me
a place called Yes Please. They're here in LA. They roast tremendous blends. They're great. I really like Camber, based in Bellingham, Washington. And they're doing tremendous single origin roasts. They're doing a lot of I would say naturally processed and lactic ferments.
I like that.
Damn, we're going there.
Yeah, we can do it. You mentioned Copenhagen, some of the best cups of coffee. Copenhagen is my favorite city I've ever been to. I loved it so much.
It's up there for me too.
It's just
you have been, yeah.
Oh, I don't even drink coffee.
So yeah. That's.
I mean, not for coffee, just like
really?
Everything there is good. The city, the people, everything. But great coffee over there too. And then in Portland, I had great coffee also, like randomly. You know, we're talking about how Korean food specifically has evolved in America. Not only that, but also globally. Producer Diane found this TikTok. This is a hot take from Korean American. Their podcast is called the Yellow Kings Pod.
Did we comment on that?
It's theirs. I didn't.
Zero comment.
Yellow Kings is bold.
Zero comment.
All right, here we go.
More recently, Korean food has gotten way too overhyped.
I agree.
I love that our culture is trending, but people that don't know what good Korean food tastes like is flooding the market. Koreans can now charge more without even lower the quality of the food. I eat bulgogi at some places and it tastes like overcooked beef with like sugar syrup, teriyaki, bulgogi sauce kind of in there, and it's like terrible.
Wait, is it overhyped? Is that
overhyped? Yeah.
Interesting.
Language.
I feel like I would like to say something about that. Yeah. And you know what? This is what I gotta take as a non-Korean guy here. There's a lot of really shitty food in general everywhere.
Yeah.
So to make a generalization that a culture is bad because of one restaurant experience, I would call that slightly misguided, because I think you could say that about all food, that like this is not good, this is not great because of one thing. I respect these gentlemen for coming and coming at it with thinking about the culture and having a hot take. I feel like everyone should have a opinion, and I like to check out their TikTok, but I feel like it's hard to hear one restaurant experience be extrapolated into the larger universe of a culture. I feel like that's maybe slightly irresponsible.
Forgive me, like they're using like the cartoon Korean food, which is bulgogi. Like every white American knows what bulgogi is.
The emoji of Korean food could be bulgogi.
No, seriously, that's what it is.
For us, like, and this is not more on them, but is Korean food overhyped? I agree and disagree. Like it's but it's like, so what's the point of that, right? Is it overhyped? Sure, yeah, of course, because I see it on Netflix now. I see it on things that I didn't see 10 years ago or when I was growing up as a kid. And
Does that mean it's overhyped, or does that just mean it's now becoming
it's part of like
more mainstream?
Yeah. And it's not just the food element. There's a culture element to it too. There's an arts element, like music. Like it's so crazy. I myself don't listen to. Is this like controversial? I don't know. Like there's Korean people that don't listen to K-pop, and there's Korean people that don't like watch Korean dramas, right? And there's Korean food that necessarily don't like Korean food, right? It is my favorite food, and so for me, on that conversation, well, basic economics is supply and demand, right? If you have, like why, as a business owner myself, I mean, do I get, he fed me an $11 brownie on the way here. Wasn't very happy about that, and
because the brownie sucked or because it was $11?
Brownie was delicious, but $11 for a brownie, my guy, it's tough,
Where'd you get this brownie?
Erewhon.
Oh, can I just shout out the brand?
Come on.
Yeah.
Like Let's Bakes, man. I like it personally, but
I didn't say the brand. You said the brand, bro.
But at Erewhon, what do you want?
Yes. So I forgot I was in LA, and like on the topic of Korean food, hey, like if we want to, we can't. You got to have one or the other. Stay consistent. You can't complain that Korean food is cheap or Asian food in itself is cheap. Because then the modern Korean restaurants, maybe in New York, like that charge $200 a plate. Like, how do we progress that conversation without saying, hey, we're going to have to pay like $16, $17 for bibimbap? Like, sorry. Like, that's
inflation.
That's just inflation. Yeah. That's economics here, guys. We're not even talking about supply and demand, hype or not hype, right? There are Korean dining tasting menus that are 200 plus that are really beautiful. Do I dine there all the time? No, and do I like going to my like homey mom cooking type restaurants that are plethora in LA? Absolutely, right? So for me, I don't know, like, so, okay, great, it's overhyped. My always question is, okay, then what? Why is that wrong or why is that not wrong? So for me, like, I think it's a good thing. At the end of the day, people are talking about it, right? So all I care about is that someone knows about it. The fact that you guys were even as non-Koreans being like, oh, everyone knows bulgogi. I didn't know everyone knows bulgogi, but it gives me a sense of pride that somebody in the middle of Kansas will know what bulgogi is. Like, that's all I care about. Overhyped or not, sure, maybe in LA, but some family in OKC, like it might not be, so I don't know how I feel. It's not
those
even about
guys,
that.
Guys are generalizing based off of their own personal perspective.
Yeah.
Which is like, back to what you're saying. It's okay to have a hot take. There's no line in the sand. There's no like, if you don't like something, like I never subscribe to the best anything, because what I think is my favorite and it's a subjective thing. How do you know what's the best? Is there a scale? Like, okay, sure, there's like awards and whatever, but even that's biased.
And what I like about this is that I hope it's overhyped, because then we can push the conversation into, so like Italian cooking, like it's not just pizza, right? Pasta, right? That'd be a very surface level conversation on Italian food, right? Like we can talk about Northern Italian food, Sicilian food. Like I would love the conversation to be like, great, we're done talking about bulgogi, bibimbap, K-barbecue because it's so overhyped. Great, let's talk about like Jeju, right? Yeah. Let's talk about beautiful food in Gwangju, right? And the regionality, right? I feel like that's where a lot of and I think Chinese food is going through that or have been through that, like Szechuan cooking, Shanghainese cooking, right? That's great. Then fine, overhype it all you want, because then we can move on to the next chapter, which is great. I'm done talking about the ABCs of Korean food. Let's talk about
calculus. Let's go to advanced calculus.
I've never taken calculus.
I'm just taking the metaphor to that level.
But you're 100% accurate in that. Like I had this conversation with my Italian friend the other day, and I was asking him, he had just done like a video where he was learning about ravioli. Now ravioli and any stuffed pasta is a ravioli, but to the Westerner, a ravioli is the square stuffed pocket. But in fact, it's not, right? And then I was asking him about bolognese, and he's like, in Bologna where they make it, this is what they do. If it's not, it's a ragu. And then it's like, there's so much nuance. Why would a culture like Korean food not have nuance as well?
Yes.
Right?
There is. Yeah.
I mean, look at bone broths. Like you've got solentang, you've got gamtang, you've got all the different bone broth tangs. And it's that's one example of like different regions. Like Busan has their own version of bone broth. Same with Jeju. Same with Seoul. Same with Itaewon. In Seoul has a place like you go to neighborhood by neighborhood. They have different styles of bone broth. So I think we are getting to that a conversation of like breaking down dishes by region in Korea. Korea's not that big. It's the size of Indiana. Only 50 million people live there. I think that needs to be said. It's important that the size of this place has so much oversized influence in East Asia, in Southeast Asia, in America, in Europe. And to us, Korea World was covering how a culture that has had war and trauma for a long time has been able to withstand it and has been able to create, like become, as these gentlemen are saying, is overhyped thing. Like this, its scale, like is incredible. The way that 50 million people have been able to create this large outsized influence. It's a remarkable story.
Yeah, that is. I didn't even know it was the size of Indiana.
Facts, man.
Nor did I know that it was 50 million people. Facts, like man. Canada is one of the largest geographical countries in the world. And there's only 35 million people there.
Really?
Wow. There's no one.
What's your favorite outside of Montreal province? What's your favorite
province?
Yeah,
Ontario.
Wow, Ontario.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's because it's right there. You know.
Yeah, right. Toronto's cool too.
I mean, Saskatchewan's pretty cool.
One more Canada question.
Yeah.
Snow, when Snow came out with Informer, was that as big as it was in the United States and Canada?
For sure.
How do you know so much about Canadian?
I grew up in Michigan. I also just enjoy.
Because Michigan is basically Canada. That's why.
Oh, yeah, that's what
we border Canada. We have a bridge that
you can walk across. Like you're there.
Yeah.
Windsor.
I'm like learning and like
Sarnia, baby.
Known each other 10 years. I didn't know he was so. Yeah. He was half.
I love Canada. Canada's great.
The overhyped thing, the learning more than like ABCs of a culture, you know, and specifically Korean. I think that like that is the most important part of evolving in anything, in any culture or anything really. And I think that the more mainstream these things become, the more susceptible society is going to be to trying all these things, right? And then in turn, like makes traveling to other countries more wanted, more enjoyable. You know, like I had that guy Max here the other day, and all the stuff you were just talking about, I didn't know before he came here, and now you're saying them, and it's reminding me. You know, it's reminding me of all that stuff. And also, just to touch on like what is mainstream and what's not, I always judge like if it's in Trader Joe's, it's mainstream. And they have I keep saying bulgogi, but it's bulgogi. That's how you pronounce it, right? Bulgogi.
B's and B's. Yeah, they go hand in hand.
Producer Diane.
So they like if it's there, it's mainstream now. You know?
It's a good. Yeah, it's true.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
because the average like American might not necessarily know what that is or might want to try it, but since Trader Joe's, and then all of a sudden there's like an interest in Korean food, and then if you're any type of experimental, then it'll be the gateway, right? Which is cool.
It's incredible. Like the food in itself, but also like we're talking about it. We're dedicating a podcast episode on it. We have a book.
It's our second podcast dedicated to Korea.
What I mean. Like this is like
this is what excites me. Sensing a theme here, producer Diane. Just to flip it, like on the whole beginning of this kind of topic, where we're talking about like it's so mainstream and it's overhyped and blah blah blah. Like now, there's an article on Reddit, and there's a whole thread on Reddit where it's like how good Korean food is getting in Western cultures and how good it's becoming, and like all these things. So there, you know, for example, I'll read this. Why is Korean food getting more and more popular in Western countries? Right?
That's your question, Sarah.
That's the thread on Reddit. Other than your books, right?
Sure, because you know we're responsible for this.
So here's one. I'll just read this off. This is like just like an answer that someone said, and it said, "What I love most about Korean food is all the ways they use vegetables. I get so tired of vegetables being hidden away in meals, so it's refreshing that Korean dishes can make the vegetables shine," which I always thought were really cool. When even at Korean barbecue, when you go to Korean barbecue, what is it called?
Banchan?
Yeah, all the things. Like, I love condiments. I love like adding things to like other things. And like when I go to Korean barbecue, it's all that, you know, which is such a cool thing. And they talk about the cucumbers and the radishes, the broccoli, the carrots, the onions, the cabbage. Another user said they have a feeling that it has a great deal to do with so many people cooking, so many people traveling, featuring cuisines, like different cuisines over the last decades, which you guys have obviously contributed to, right? This one says, we had a Korean church where I grew up, and they did picnic barbecues where they invited everybody, not just people who were part of the church.
Yeah.
So that's like more of like a community-based, like come try.
Convivial, yes.
So that's like, that's what you guys are doing. You're contributing to that. You're contributing to the knowledge and like the camaraderie around a new cuisine and making it more approachable, right?
The vegetable part of it, there's an actual cultural part of it, is that also Korea is the size of Indiana. We just don't have space for a lot of the cattling and whatnot. So you have to cook with rice and vegetables and whatnot.
It's also a peninsula to butt in. Sorry.
Yeah.
So seafood is extremely important part of the story. So it's not just the beef that's mostly being imported, but it's like the seafood that is being used in literally every dish. The growing season is also very short.
Yeah. And I would say on the topic of like, why is it getting popular in Western? I think there's more chefs. I always have this anecdote. When I went to culinary school in 2000 or whatever, it's Korean. There was a lot of Korean chefs at the Culinary Institute of America, the world's premier culinary school. But we weren't cooking Korean food. Like, if you ask any of my Korean friends, like, hey, where are you going to go after you graduate? Like, what kitchens do you want to go into? It was one of the 5 or 6 at that time, 3 Michelin star restaurants. 300 people just vying for like 6 spots, and it was French, Italian. I think Masa was Japanese, right? So we weren't like, let's go cook Korean food, or worse yet, let's go cook Korean food, or I'm going to go back to my home country and open up a restaurant. That like was not a part of the conversation. And I think now it's a legitimate, like, not only we have Michelin star rated, and not saying that's like the end all be all of where cuisine is, but the fact is these chefs and these cooks and these young culinary students, Korean or not Korean, it's a viable option to be like, hey, I really want to work at Atomix. I really want to work at Chungshik. I want to work in Korea. And I think for me, that kind of change that could be in what we talked about earlier, the flow of information is just completely different than when I was cooking and was a young culinary student. But I think that also contributes to like, okay, the food game is better. I also think the dining public expectation, like, we know what good food is. Like, we don't have to eat what is. We have dining power where we're going to support the businesses that are really good food. So,
and I'll just say, okay, the question on Reddit is like, why is Korean food big, or why is it getting bigger? It's because it's good. And like, let's just look at our book. We've got like rose tteokbokki. So it's like tteokbokki that's been kind of streaked with you say rose, I say rose. We don't have an accent on it, so
that's true.
We differ in our opinion. But it's been streaked with cream, so it's like a creamier version of tteokbokki. We've got extra beefy tenjanjjigae.
Yes.
We've got like corn dogs that are like delicately fried. We've got pancakes in various forms. And to me, as the non-Korean who's been studying this for a minute, it's just delicious food. It's spicy. It can be mild. It can be plant-based. It can be extremely seafood-based. It can be acidic. It can be bitter. It can be sweet. It really runs the range. It can be beef-centric. It can be pork-centric. It can be mackerel-centric. I mean, I feel like I'm Bubba Gump right now, and this is like not what it's all about. But like, it's one of these amazing cultures that has done so much with so little natural resources. I think that really adapts well to the home kitchen and also restaurants.
And it makes it approachable, right? It's just so approachable.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, this is now I'm fucking hungry.
Yeah, word.
I'm legit hungry, actually. I was hungry before I got here, actually. Just
legit.
Korea World, is it out now?
Absolutely. Out now.
out.
Check it out. Bookstores everywhere.
Amazon?
I love Amazon. It's a great seller. I like local bookstores too.
Local bookstores are great.
We like it all.
Yeah. Take it all.
Yeah.
Korea World.
I'm going to be in Korea.
Hell yeah.
Maddie's going to be in somewhere.
Well, we're going to Denver and Dallas this summer. We're going to
Dallas.
Atlanta. And we've got some plans for Minneapolis and Chicago. And then we're going to head over maybe to London and then possibly Korea. So we're going to have the rest of the years touring.
Check out the book, Korea World. I am excited to get my copy.
Yes.
Yep, we'll get you one.
And cook up some real Korean food.
Word.
It's all real.
Appreciate
Yeah.
your time.
Thank
man.
you. This is good
Thank you,
times.
Josh.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Appreciate having us in.
Hell yeah.
Really, really great
Hell yeah.
questions. Thanks, man.
I hope so.
Yeah, great.
Go Giants.
Full Discourse is a podcast hosted by me, Josh Elkin, produced by Diane Kang, Melissa D. Montz, and Diamond M Print Productions. Camera operator Jeff Liu, post-production sound by Coco Lawrence, production assistance by Melanie D. Watson, and music by me.